Chapter 1436. Seeing that they were from her sect, she walked out. What happened to you? Did you encounter a ferocious beast? The sudden voice gave the 10 of them a fright. Some of them instinctively jumped up and tore their wounds. Some of them cried out in surprise and lost their composure. When they saw the green figure that walked out, all of them widened their eyes. Who are you? Oh, I'm also from Danyang sect, but I'm from Three Yang Peak. She froze for a moment, then grinned foolishly. One of the alchemists frowned and stared at Fengjiu. You're from Danyang sect? How did a Foundation establishment cultivator come in? I remember now. He was brought in by Qindao. At that time I saw him beside Qindao, so I'm sure he's a servant from Three Yang Peak. The alchemist on the other side said. Seeing that it was someone from their sect and that he knew her, he could not help but secretly sigh in relief. It was fine as long as he was sure she would not be a threat to them. Did you encounter a ferocious beast? Why are all of you injured? She asked curiously. These people were golden core cultivators, and one of them was even a nascent soul cultivator. How did they end up in such a sorry state? Could it be that these alchemists only cultivated their spiritual power and not their combat strength? It was really a waste of their strength. What does it have to do with you? One of the alchemists said as he applied medicine to his wound. However, his hand was injured, and after applying medicine, it was not easy to bandage it. Thus he shouted to Fengjiu, "Come over and help me bandage my wound." When she heard those matter-of-fact words and saw that none of those people wanted to answer her question, it was obvious that they disdained to answer a part-time disciple like her. Seeing this, she smiled and said, "But this has nothing to do with me." When everyone heard this, they were stunned for a moment, then became furious. "You're just a servant. We let you bandage our wounds because we think highly of you." Fengjiu waved her hand. No need, no need. It's true that I'm a servant, but I didn't come here to bandage your wounds." She chuckled and said, "You're all alchemists. Can't you just bandage each other's wounds? Why do you need the help of a lowly handyman like me?" Hearing Fengjiu's words, everyone's expression changed slightly. Seeing that the odd job worker really didn't come forward to help, their faces darkened. They secretly thought that this odd job worker was too impudent. When they returned to the sect, they would definitely teach him a lesson. Suddenly a wolf howl sounded, followed by a series of wolf howls. Hearing the wolf howls, the faces of the 10 injured alchemists changed, and they stood up one after another. "It's a wolf pack. It's a wolf pack. What should we do?" Looking at their pale faces, Fengjiu leisurely leaned against a tree and said, "It must be a pack of wolves. You have blood on you, and the smell of blood is so strong that I can smell it from a few hundred meters away. What's more, those wolves who love to eat human flesh and blood." Hearing Fengjiu's words, someone panicked. "Let's go. Quickly leave this place, let's go outside." They would only be safe if they left this place and went to the outside. At this moment he really regretted it. He shouldn't have thought of coming in to pick some precious spiritual herbs. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation. The wolf howls were getting closer and closer, as if they were coming from the direction of a half circle. The 10 alchemists wanted to go outside, but when they heard the wolf howls, they broke out in cold sweat and stopped in their tracks. Chapter 1437. Fengjiu leaned against a tree and crossed her arms as she looked at the panicked crowd with a strange expression. Alright, she felt that these alchemists were too afraid of death. Actually, if it was someone else with a golden core cultivation level, even if they only cultivated spiritual power and did not have any fighting strength, they would not be at a loss like this. However, when these people heard the wolf howl, they felt like they were about to die under the claws of the wolves. If they did not even have the will to fight, how could they have the ability to fight? What do we do? What do we do? Oh, right, climb up the tree, quickly climb up the tree. Seeing them jump up the tree in a hurry, she could not help but grin. Some of the wolves here know how to climb up the tree. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw that they all froze and stared at each other speechlessly. Howl. The wolves howled again, and this time, several wolves appeared 10 meters away. Each of them was more than a meter tall and had gray fur. Their mouths were slightly open, revealing sharp fangs. Saliva dripped from their mouths as they stared at them with ferocious and bloodthirsty eyes. The wolves are here." The alchemists' faces turned pale. Some of them held their swords in their hands, but they could not help but tremble. Fighting as honorable alchemists, this kind of vulgar thing was disdained by them. They might be able to deal with weaker cultivators, but against these bloodthirsty and ferocious wolves, just looking at them made their hearts tremble. How could they still have the strength to fight? Looking at the pale faces of the people on the tree and under the tree, Fengjiu grinned. Fellow alchemists, although I'm an odd job worker, I'm still a foundation establishment cultivator. Furthermore, I'm not good at alchemy, but I specialize in martial arts, so it's more than enough to deal with these wolves. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Their eyes were filled with surprise as they looked at Fengjiu. Really? Of course. She raised her chin and said. Then hurry up and chase the wolves away. Hearing this, Fengjiu chuckled. It's really not difficult to chase the wolves away, but this is a matter of working for free. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other and said, if you chase the wolves away, each of us will give you a bottle of pills. Pills? No. She shook her head. I don't want pills. She had her own pills, why would she want theirs? What's more, she might not even fancy their medicinal pills. But everyone was stunned. You don't want the pills we gave you? Are you stupid? Do you know how precious our medicinal pills are? Sure enough, he was just a servant. If he didn't even want medicinal pills, then what did he want? If you don't want pills, then what do you want? Someone asked in surprise. Gold, silver, jewels, jade, and treasures are fine, but I don't want things like pills. She grinned and asked, do you have the things I mentioned? When everyone heard this, they all had strange expressions on their faces. You really want gold, silver, and jewelry? Yes. She nodded in response. Then you chase the wolf pack away first. We'll give it to you after this. One of the alchemists said. Unexpectedly, Fengjiu chuckled. That's fine. The wolves haven't even gotten close yet. I think it's better for me to collect the gold, silver, and jewelry first before chasing the wolves away. This way I can be braver and risk my life, right? But in this situation, how can we take it out? This is inconvenient. Chapter 1438. Under Fengjiu's smiling gaze, the alchemist could only untie his Qinkuan bag and take out some gold coins or precious stones to hand over to him. Seeing Fengjiu take the items and stuff them into his Qinkuan bag, the alchemist's eyes twitched and he asked, is this enough? If he continued to take them out, he would be completely defrauded. And it's about enough. Fengjiu nodded, his eyes narrowed into a smile as he patted the alchemist's shoulder. Don't worry with me here, you definitely won't be missing an arm or a leg. Hearing this, the alchemist's mouth twitched. He watched as the youth tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and leaped to another alchemist to receive his so-called reward. Everyone took out gold coins and precious stones to give to him, but there were also a few who were unwilling. They stared suspiciously at Fengjiu and said, you alone can chase away the pack of wolves? Don't joke around, you have to think carefully. If you cheat us, you won't be able to finish eating when we return. A wolf howl was heard as one of the gray wolves fiercely pounced on the tree trunk, causing the tree to shake violently. The alchemist who was standing on the tree did not have a firm footing and was hit by the wolf, causing him to slip and fall down. He fell on the back of the wolf and rolled to the side. He was so shocked that his face turned pale and he screamed out involuntarily. Help! Awoo! When the other alchemists on the tree saw this scene, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their faces were deathly pale as they hugged the tree branches tightly to prevent themselves from falling down. Especially when they saw that the alchemist had fallen down the tree. Other than the giant wolf that was pouncing on him, there were a few other horses that fiercely rushed out from not far away and pounced on the alchemist. Standing on the tree and hugging the tree branches tightly, they could almost see the alchemist being torn to pieces in the next moment. When they thought of that scene, their bodies trembled and their legs went weak. They couldn't help but squat down. Unlike them, Fengjiu quickly turned around when she heard the commotion behind her. At the same time, she jumped down and raised her hand. A sharp cold light flashed in front of everyone's eyes. In the next moment, there was a blood-curdling scream and blood spurted out, splattering all over the ground. Adat, the alchemist who had fallen down the tree, screamed in horror. Seeing the giant wolf pouncing on him, he closed his eyes and didn't dare to open them. Until his face was splashed with warm blood, he was startled and he instantly opened his eyes. What he saw was a green figure holding a blood-stained dagger standing in front of him. And the giant wolf's corpse, over a meter-long wolf's carcass that was over a meter-long wolf's body that was over 1 meter-long wolf's carcass over. He's dead. The alchemist fell to the ground with the wolf's corpse on top of him. He could only see blood in front of his eyes and was at a loss. What are you still? Quickly go up. Fungio kicked away the giant wolf's carcass and picked up the alchemist who was lying limp on the ground. Using her strength, she threw him up the tree. The alchemist cried out in shock and quickly hugged the tree branches tightly. He stared blankly at the green figure below. The other people on the tree were the same. They only saw the green figure shuttling through the pack of wolves, raising his dagger and slashing it down. The glint of the dagger was blood red and the murderous aura was threatening. Chapter 1439. A woo. The stimulation of the wolf's blood caused the nature of the wolves to be even more aroused. With a savage howl, the sharp wolf claws slashed out like sharp blades, leaving a few deep claw marks on the tree trunks. As the corpses of the giant wolves on the ground increased, the people on the tree couldn't help but swallow their saliva, their eyes filled with shock and fear. The youth who was circling the pack of wolves was reaping the lives of the ferocious beasts like a god of death. It was so easy and effortless that they could not even see a single wound on his body. The blood that splattered on his green robes was all the blood of the giant wolves. A long wolf howl sounded. The remaining 7 to 8 giant wolves stared at Fungio unwillingly as they bared their teeth and howled. In the end they could only retreat quickly after that long howl. Fungio's gaze swept around and saw the Wolf King standing in the distance. After glancing at the Wolf King, he retracted his gaze and squatted down to dig out the beast crystals of the giant wolves. At this moment, the 10 alchemists on the tree saw that the crisis had been averted and each of them let out a sigh of relief. They looked at each other and then uncomfortably came down from the tree. They tidied their robes and tried their best to maintain the noble bearing that alchemists should have. However, each of them were in a sorry state and their faces were deathly pale. Some of them were even trembling slightly. No matter how one looked at them, they didn't have the slightest bit of composure. It was only because they were trying their best to hold on that they looked a little comical. After keeping the beast crystals, Fungio turned and walked towards the 2 people behind him. He stretched out his hand in front of them and revealed a harmless smile, saying, "You haven't given me yours yet." The 2 people paused for a moment. Thinking of how ferocious he was when he killed the wolves, their hearts trembled. They hurriedly took out a corresponding amount of gold coins or precious stones and placed them in Fungio's hands. Seeing Fungio weighing the weight of the items in his hands, the 2 hurriedly said, "We only have these. We don't really need gold coins to enter the secret territory, so we really don't have that much. However, we still have some pills. Do you want them?" After saying this, not only did the people beside him feel strange, even the 2 people who were talking felt very strange, and their expressions became strange. In the past it was others who begged them to give them pills or sell them some pills. This was the first time they had asked a young odd job worker if he wanted their pills. Moreover, it was free. This feeling was really strange. Forget it. Although we're not from the same peak, we're still from the same sect. I won't bicker with you. She smiled and put away the things in her hands. Then she said to them, "Hurry up and go to the periphery. There aren't just giant wolves in the depths of this place. If you're really surrounded, you'll lose your life. Don't throw away your life for some spirit herbs that you haven't even seen." Looking at these alchemists who were being taught a lesson by her like children, Fungio suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and cleared his throat. "Well, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. In the future, I'll have to ask you all to take care of me in the sect." When everyone heard this, they were stunned for a moment, then hurriedly said, Of course. Chapter 1440. Everyone looked at each other in dismay and shook their heads. They only knew that the young man was an odd job worker from 3 Yang Peak and was brought in by Qingdao. They didn't know anything else. "Alright, we'll know who he is once we get back to the sect and ask around. Let's leave quickly, the smell of blood here is too strong." One of them said and hurriedly led everyone away, heading towards the outskirts. On the other side, the Fungio who had earned a lot was in a good mood. Her footsteps were extremely fast, as if the soles of her feet were not touching the ground at all. It was strange and ethereal. Around evening she found a water source in the forest. It was a water source that flowed down from a high place. It was so clear that she could see the bottom and there were leaves floating in it. After washing her face, she took off her boots and sat on the edge, soaking her feet in the water. The cold feeling seeped into her body from the soles of her feet. It was so comfortable that she closed her eyes. "So cool," she softly murmured with a smile on her face. She placed her hands behind her back and slightly raised her head to look at the sky with narrowed eyes. She listened to the birds chirping in the forest, the rustling of the leaves in the wind, and the tinkling of the mountain spring. Her entire body relaxed. Actually, there were times when she felt lost. She had been wandering around alone to gain experience. She had spent quite a lot of days like this. It was rare for her to have loved ones in this life. Sometimes she really just wanted to be an idle and lazy person. After bringing her mother back home, she thought that she should also go back. Who cares about the 8 great empires? It would be better for her to return to her Phoenix dynasty and be an idle person. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard a faint sound coming from the forest. She was startled for a moment. She withdrew her feet and wiped the water off, putting on her boots and walked down the mountain spring water. About 100 meters away, she saw 2 middle-aged men washing their faces in the spring water and drinking a few mouthfuls. Seeing the 2 men drinking the water that flowed down from her feet, the corner of her mouth twitched. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Who's there?" The 2 men vigilantly turned around and shouted in a deep voice. When they swept their gazes across the surroundings, they frowned when they saw the green figure standing not far away. "Who are you?" Fungio's gaze swept across the jade tablets on their waists and the badges on their chests. She composed herself, coughed lightly, and went forward to bow. 3 Young Peak Service Disciple. Fungio greets the 2 martial uncles. "You're a service disciple from 3 Young Peak?" The 2 men were slightly surprised. They looked at the youth in green and glanced at the jade tablet on the youth's waist. They were a bit puzzled and confused. "You're only a services martial service. Another odd job disciple. How did you get in here?" "Senior Marshal Uncle, it was Senior Marshal Brother Chin who brought me here. I was in the same group as Senior Marshal Brother Chin and the others. However, when we encountered a giant bear in the forest, I got separated from them and was chased all the way here by the giant bear." Her expression was pleasantly surprised and excited. She looked at the 2 people in front of her with a respectful gaze. "I've delivered spiritual herbs to the 2 martial uncles' cave residences. It's just that I never had the chance to meet martial uncles. I didn't expect to meet martial uncles here. I'm really too lucky. You actually drank the water I washed my feet with." She didn't know what to say. From the jade tablets and badges on their waists, she determined that the 2 of them were disciples of 3 young children. It was normal for them to come here. After all, there were precious spiritual herbs that didn't exist outside. Chapter 1441. Her eyes flashed as she recalled what San Yongzi said to her mother that day. Therefore she looked at the 2 of them and said with a smile, "Speaking of which, what a coincidence. I also met Uncle Master Shangguan in this forest earlier." "What? You met junior sister Shangguan?" The 2 of them looked at Fungio in astonishment. She really went into the depths of the forest? Hearing this and seeing their reaction, she blinked and said, "I only saw the white figure from afar and it looked very much like Martial Aunt Shangguan. I didn't see her face, but I've seen Martial Aunt Shangguan a few times in the mountains, so I'm somewhat sure that the figure was her, but what?" The 2 of them asked nervously. Fungio looked at them and said worriedly, "But at that time, I saw that Martial Aunt Shangguan seemed to be injured, and there was no one beside her. I wanted to chase after her, but I was only in the foundation establishment stage, so I couldn't catch up to her speed." She heard that 3 Yongzi's disciples had some ulterior motives towards her mother. Since that was the case, she could make use of them. Sure enough, when the 2 of them heard this, they frowned and walked to the side, whispering, "Eldest senior brother is right. Master will definitely let junior sister pick the herbs that he needs." Could it be that what eldest senior brother said was true? Master really intends to. No matter what, I think we should remind junior sister. But I'm afraid that even if we want to, we can't change Master's decision. Let's not talk about other things first. If junior sister really wants to pick the 3 herbs, it must be in the mountain of 1,000 herbs in the depths of the secret realm. Only there are the 3 herbs that Master needs. However, there are many guardian beasts in the mountain of 1,000 herbs. I'm afraid that if we're late, junior sister will. Then let's hurry over, maybe we can help." Thus, the 2 of them prepared to rush into the depths of the forest. At this moment, a pair of hands reached out and pulled on their robes. "Martial uncles, please wait." Fungio, who had heard their words, looked at them and blinked innocently, saying, "Martial uncles, take me with you. I'll die if I stay here alone in this deep forest. If you follow this direction, you'll reach the outer perimeter. We want to go deeper and it'll be inconvenient for you. One of them said, waving his hand and glancing at the robe that was being pulled. Let go. Fengjiu didn't let go. Instead he said, but Martial Uncle, if you leave, what if I encounter ferocious beasts when I go out? What if they encountered a pack of wolves? I will die. Martial Uncle, we are all from Three Yang Peak. Although I am only a part-time disciple, I am still a disciple. You must take me with you. Hearing this, the two of them frowned, looked at each other and sent out a wave of energy. You'll die faster if you follow us. With that, they ignored Fengjiu and rushed into the forest. Seeing this, Fengjiu grinned. Mountain of all medicines? Is this the destination? With that, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and followed behind the two of them. At the same time, in the depths of the forest at the foot of the mountain of 1,000 herbs, Shangguan Wanrong, who was dressed in white, raised her head and looked at the precipitous mountain of 1,000 herbs. She looked at the myriad of spiritual herbs growing on the mountain. Chapter 1442. She glanced at the mountain of all medicines in front of her and called out her flying sword, intending to ride it up. This side of the mountain was too steep, so she could only go up the mountain first and then look for those herbs. However, when she flew up on her flying sword and approached the mountain of all medicines, a wave of pressure came from the mountain and fiercely pressed her down from midair. Her entire body instantly lost balance and fell down. "Ah!" she cried out in surprise. Due to the pressure, she was unable to stabilize her body as she fell. Seeing that she was about to fall, a figure swept out and caught her. Shangguan Wanrong was startled and was slightly surprised when she saw the person who came. Eldest senior brother? Why are you here? After landing, she steadied herself and hurriedly retreated from his side. She looked at the person in front of her with a complicated expression. This was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He wore a green robe and his black hair was tied up. His face was upright and handsome. In the cultivation world where handsome men and beautiful women were as common as clouds, this kind of appearance wasn't considered outstanding. However, his aura was steady and his deep eyes were filled with the light of wisdom. His entire body exuded the steady aura of a mature man. At this moment he looked at Shangguan Wanrong, who retreated from his side, and withdrew his hand with a natural expression. However, there was a touch of disappointment and loss in his heart. Junior sister, you can't go pick these herbs. He looked at her and said in a deep voice. Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong's eyes flashed. Eldest senior brother knows what herbs I came to pick? Didn't master say that he only told her about this? Only told her to come here to pick herbs? Didn't he say that he had other instructions for eldest senior brother and the others? Why, seemingly seeing her doubts, Duan Mubai sighed softly. Master didn't tell us that you came to the mountain of all medicines to pick herbs, but we all know. Junior sister, I've been by master's side for so many years, so master's matters can't be hidden from me. Do you know that his voice paused as if he didn't know how to say it? It also seemed that these words were difficult to say. Shangguan Wanrong frowned slightly. Isn't it just picking herbs? Could it be that there's something I don't know? Duan Mubai looked at her and said, Give me your hand. Hearing this, she hesitated for a moment and reached out her hand. She saw him reach out and put his finger on her wrist, carefully checking her pulse. Seeing this, she was puzzled. What was he doing? Was there something wrong with her body? Impossible. If there was any discomfort in her body, she would know. After all, she was also an alchemist and more or less knew some medical knowledge. After a while, Duan Mubai withdrew his hand and sighed softly. Master is indeed master. I'm useless and can't detect the abnormality in your body. However, I can tell you that you really can't go and pick this medicine. If you do, you'll be giving away your life. Why? She didn't understand. Although master was strict with her, not allowing her to go out and not allowing her to have too much contact with her senior brothers from time to time, he would still refine some pills that could increase her strength and were beneficial to her. Could it be that he would harm her? What's more, she was very careful. Even if it was the pill that her master gave her, she would only take it after checking that it wasn't poisonous and wouldn't cause any harm to her body. There shouldn't be any problems. Chapter 1443. He looked at her and paused for a moment before saying, Junior sister, I actually think it's better for you to leave the Danyang sect. Shangguan Wanrong's heart sank when she heard this. She asked, Eldest senior brother, do you know something about me that I don't know? Eldest senior brother, little junior sister. Two voices were heard. The two people standing at the foot of the mountain turned around and saw two figures rushing over from not far away. Behind them, there was a thin and small cyan figure following. Its third junior brother and fourth junior brother. Duan Mubai's gaze swept past the two people and landed on the cyan figure behind them. Who is that? Shangguan Wanrong glanced at the two people in front of her. Then her gaze landed on the cyan figure behind them. When she saw who the thin and small figure was, she couldn't help but be slightly startled. It's Three Young Peak's odd job disciple Fengjiu. But why did he also come here? Eldest senior brother, little junior sister, why are the two of you together? The two people arrived in front of them and looked at them with surprise. I knew little junior sister would come here, so I waited for her here. Duan Mubai looked at the two of them and said, why did you also bring an odd job disciple here? How did he come in? There was a rule that only Golden Core Realm alchemists could enter. That youth was only an odd job disciple and a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator at that. Why did he also come in? And he even followed them here? The two people were startled. They looked at each other and then turned around. When they saw the figure following behind them, a strange expression appeared on their faces. We clearly let him go out first, but we didn't expect him to actually follow us in. What surprised them was that this odd job disciple could actually keep up with their footsteps. However, when they saw that the odd job disciple was in a sorry state, his cyan clothes were slightly torn, his face was covered in dust, and he was sweating profusely as he followed behind them, they were relieved. Martial Aunt Shangguan. Fengjiu waved at his mother from afar and grinned happily. Because he saw her standing there safe and sound. Therefore he quickly walked forward. Only the heavens knew how difficult it was for her to make herself look so wretched and covered in sweat. It would be strange if they didn't find it strange if someone was following them with light footsteps. Arriving in front of him, she smiled and bowed respectfully towards Duan Mubai. Greetings, Martial Uncle. He hadn't seen any of them even after spending so much time at the Three Young Peak. However, he didn't expect to see three of them here. The last one didn't seem to be here. Why are you here? Shangguan Wanrong looked at Fengjiu and asked. She saw that he was in a sorry state and was sweating profusely, but there were no wounds on his body. She couldn't help but be puzzled. In the depths of the forest, even golden core cultivators would inevitably be injured. Although this youth was in a sorry state, there was not a single wound on his body. It was as if he had not encountered any danger along the way. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and squinted his eyes. I was chased into this place by a giant bear. Fortunately, I met the two martial uncles and then I followed them all the way here. Duan Mubai, the eldest disciple of the Three Yangzi, was somewhat out of her expectations. This person was calm and reserved, and his appearance was maintained to be extremely youthful. It was impossible to tell that he was already a few decades old. Chapter 1444. Yes. She replied and lowered her gaze. Duan Mubai stared at Fengjiu for a while before looking away at Shangguan Wanrong. Junior sister, what do you plan to do next? As soon as they heard this, their gazes descended onto Shangguan Wanrong, and they saw her looking at the mountain of 1,000 herbs above her. She said, since Master told me to get those 3 herbs, then I'll go get them. As for the rest, we'll talk about it after we return to the sect. She wanted to see why she would lose her life if she picked those 3 herbs. What did those 3 herbs have to do with her? What exactly did her master want to do? Fengjiu's eyes flickered and he thought to himself, those 3 herbs? What exactly are those 3 herbs? Why did these people's expressions change when they mentioned those 3 herbs? Seeing this, Duan Mubai sighed. Junior sister, why do you have to do this? Eldest senior brother, you don't have to say any more. Shangguan Wanrong looked at them and said, I'll go into the mountain of 1,000 herbs to pick herbs. Don't follow me. Don't worry, I'll be fine. We'll meet in the sect. As she spoke, she cupped her hands and bowed to the 3 of them before walking forward. Junior sister. Duan Mubai stood in front of her and frowned. The mountain of 1,000 herbs has restrictions in the air, so you can't go up on your sword. It's too dangerous for you to go up like this. If you fall from midair like before, how many times do you think you'll be so lucky? I'll be careful. She looked at him steadily and said, Eldest senior brother, this is the task that Master gave me. Moreover, Master told me that he has another task for you. I think that it's impossible for you to be here. Hearing this, their eyes flickered slightly. That's right, they shouldn't have appeared here. Their master did give them some other instructions, But when they found out that she had entered this place, they came looking for her. They didn't follow her but looked at each other as she walked forward. Finally, their gazes landed on Duan Mubai. Eldest senior brother, are we really going to let junior sister go into the mountain to look for herbs? Not to mention other things, there are many poisonous snakes and fierce beasts there. If she goes alone, won't she? Go and do what Shirzuan told you to do. I'll follow junior sister to take a look, Duan Mubai instructed and gestured for the two of them to leave first. Then, as if he had thought of something, he said, "Oh right, bring that odd job disciple out as well." Autumn. Where's he? He turned around but found that the youth who was originally standing not far away had disappeared at some point. The two of them were also stunned. They looked around and suddenly pointed to the front. Eldest senior brother, look. That servant disciple is over there. Only to see that the cyan figure had already passed by them at some unknown time, following behind Shangguan Wanrong. Seeing this scene, they couldn't help but be startled. What is this odd job worker trying to do? A mere foundation establishment cultivator dared to enter the mountain of 1,000 medicines? Does he want to die? Duan Mubai said angrily and quickly chased after him. At this moment, Shangguan Wanrong, who was in front, looked at the young man behind her and couldn't help but stop. Why are you following me? Go back quickly. Fengjiu grinned and looked at her with narrowed eyes. Uncle Master Shangguan, don't you want to pick herbs? I'll go in with you. I can pick herbs too. Chapter 1445. It's all right, I can protect myself. Shangguan Wanrong was about to speak when Duan Mubai walked over and said to Fengjiu with a solemn face, "How can a servant disciple like you protect yourself? Hurry up and follow them out." Hearing this, Fengjiu blinked and came to Shangguan Wanrong's side. "Martial Aunt Shangguan, just let me follow you. I really won't cause any trouble for you. It wasn't easy coming here and I also want to go up and pick herbs." As she spoke, she paused and glanced at Duan Mubai before continuing. "Moreover, there's no rule that says that disciples who come here to train can't go near the mountain of 1,000 herbs. If you don't bring me along, then I can only stay away from you. However, I will still enter the mountain of 1,000 herbs." Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong's gaze moved slightly, and she looked deeply at Fengjiu before saying, "Since that's the case, then follow me. Junior sister. Eldest senior brother, you should go and do your own thing. I'll be fine here. If anything really happens, it will be after we return to the sect. At that time, if something really happens that I can't save myself, I hope that eldest senior brother can save my life." Her voice paused slightly as she looked into the distance and sighed softly. "Junior sister, I still have an unfulfilled wish. There's still someone I want to see." She was not afraid of death, but she was afraid that she would not be able to see her daughter, and not be able to see the man hidden deep in her heart. Fengjiu looked at the expression on her face and the helplessness in her words, and his heart clenched. "Mother, are you thinking of father and me? Do you want to go back and see us? Actually, I'm right here, right in front of you." Duan Mubai's expression froze when he heard this, and he nodded solemnly. "Junior sister, don't worry, eldest senior brother promises you." He looked deeply at her and reminded her worriedly, "Since that's the case, then you must be careful when you enter the mountain." Shangguan Wanrong nodded in response and watched as he walked towards the other two. The three of them left together. "Let's go." She looked at Fengjiu and said, then turned and walked forward. Fengjiu looked at her from behind. He opened his mouth to say something, but he didn't know where to start. Was she going to tell her directly that she was her daughter? He was Feng Qingge? Could she believe it? If she were to say this out loud, even she herself wouldn't believe it. How could someone who used to be from a 9th-ranked country come to one of the 8 great empires, and in front of her? If she said that, she was afraid that she would only think that someone had sent her to get close to her. Thinking of this, she scratched her head in frustration. "Zai, why is it so difficult to acknowledge a relative?" Shangguan Wanrong, who was walking in front, felt that the youth behind her had been looking at her. Judging from her breathing, it seemed that she had encountered something annoying and was in a difficult situation. However, since he didn't say anything, she didn't ask further. After all, it was his privacy. However, she slowed down her pace and looked in front of her. "This mountain of 1,000 herbs has been sealed in the air. We can only go around this side and go up from the other side. Follow me closely. Some of the herbs in the forest are poisonous. Don't touch them in case you get poisoned." "Yes." Fengjiu responded and quickly walked to her side. After glancing at her, he walked forward with her. Chapter 1446. 2 days later they finally circled around the foot of the mountain and climbed up 10,000 Medicine Mountain. She followed beside her mother and watched her skillfully explore the forest, checking if there were any ferocious beasts in the surroundings. She would also pay attention to whether or not there were any guardian spiritual beasts when picking medicinal herbs. During these 2 days, they didn't encounter any major incidents or dangers. They walked towards the edge of the mountain, close to the precipitous wall. It seemed that the first medicinal herb grew in that precipitous wall. Thus she glanced at her mother, who was squatting down to pick a spiritual herb, and asked, "Martial Uncle Shangguan, Martial Uncle Duan and the others said that you need to pick 3 spiritual herbs. What kind of spiritual herbs are they?" He was very curious. What 3 spiritual herbs were they that had to be picked? Moreover, from what they said, it seemed that if they picked all 3 herbs and gave them to 3 Yangzi, would her good mother lose her life? Why was it like this? Those are top-quality spiritual herbs. You don't recognize them. As Shangguan Wanrong spoke, she turned around and glanced at her. "Are you tired? Do you want to rest for a while?" Hearing this, she hurriedly said, "I'm just hungry." Hearing this, she took out a seclusion grain pill and handed it to Fengjiu. "Have you finished eating? Take this." Unexpectedly, Fengjiu shook his head and waved his hand. "I don't like to eat medicine to fill my stomach. I like to eat meat." Saying this, he couldn't help but grin. Shangguan Wanrong was startled and revealed a faint smile. "If you want to eat meat, you'll have to look for it on this mountain. Let's see if there's any meat to eat." "Then should we rest for a while?" She looked at her expectantly and asked. "Rest? In any case, there's still a lot of time. There's no rush." As she spoke, she looked around and pointed to a place not far away. "Over there. There's a large flat rock over there. There's no grass around, so we can rest there." "Okay," Fengjiu responded, then said, "Martial Uncle Shangguan, then you go sit for a while. I'll be back in a while." As soon as he finished speaking, he ran off. "Hey." Before Shangguan Wanrong could finish her sentence, she saw that Fengjiu had already run away. She could only go to the big rock and sit there waiting for him to come back. About the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, Shangguan Wanrong, who was drinking water, saw the black-clothed young man come back with 2 wild pheasants in one hand and a bundle of dry branches in the other. She was startled, got up and walked forward. "Sure, Shangguan, you just sit down. I'll do the rest." Fengjiu grinned, indicating that she didn't need to come over. Shangguan Wanrong came to Fengjiu's side and took the bundle of branches from her hands. She said with some surprise, "I didn't see any wild pheasants on the way here. How did you catch them?" This kind of pheasant ran the fastest. Without a certain speed, it was impossible to catch it, especially in such a mountain forest. "What's the big deal about catching 2 pheasants? I often run around by myself, so I'm used to doing these things. I have experience." She smiled as she spoke. She had Shangguan Wanrong go sit on the side while she took care of it herself. Not long after, she lit the branches on fire and then placed the 2 wild pheasants in the fire to roast. She said with a smile, "Martial Uncle, just wait to taste my cooking. How could those seclusion grain pills be as fragrant as this meat?" Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong smiled lightly and took a branch with pheasants in it from Fengjiu's hands. "I'll help." She looked at the pheasants being roasted in the fire and saw the young man's skilled hands. She couldn't help but ask, "You're so young. How come you often do these things?" Chapter 1447. She was startled and asked, "Why are you running around? You're still young, will your family be able to stop worrying?" Fengjiu's hand that was flipping the pheasant paused. He looked up at her and smiled. "I came to find my mother and I can protect myself." "Find your mother?" She was slightly surprised and asked, "Then did you find her?" "I found her, she's in the sect." He looked at her as he spoke. Meeting the youth's clear and smiling eyes, Shangguan Wanrong's heart jumped and she inexplicably jumped up. She felt that this youth's words had a deeper meaning, as if there was a layer of gauze shrouding it, making it impossible for people to see clearly. "Then your mother doesn't know that you came to find her? You're in the same sect but she didn't recognize you?" Perhaps because this topic touched her heart, she couldn't help but ask again. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, "My mother probably thought that I was still at home. My home is very far from here, so she didn't think that I would come. Moreover, she left when I was very young, so it's normal that she didn't recognize me." "Then why did she leave you?" she asked in a daze. My mother's family didn't allow her to be with my father, so they took her back and locked her up. My father raised me alone, and sometimes my father would hold my mother's things in a daze. I thought that when I had the ability I would help find my mother. His voice paused and he looked at Shangguan Wanrong, who was in a daze, and said, I want to reunite with my family. Martial Uncle Shangguan, tell me, if you were my mother, would you go back with me? Shangguan Wanrong stared at Fengjiu in a daze, waves of shock and excitement surging in her heart. Her eyes were red and tears welled up in her eyes. In an instant, thoughts flashed through her mind. String after string of information was connected by her at this moment, as if she didn't dare to believe it, and also felt that it was inconceivable. In the past she always felt that this youth seemed to like to get close to her. Wherever she appeared she would appear. The few times they met she showed her intimacy and joy that was so obvious. He told her that her surname was Feng and her name was Fengjiu. He told her that he missed his mother. He even ran over to ask her if she would participate in the training in the mystic realm. She even told him that he was only at the foundation establishment stage and couldn't enter the arcane realm. However, he still managed to enter. Not only did he come in, he even came to her side. If she still couldn't figure out this string of matters by now, she would be Shangguan Wanrong in vain. The more she looked at Fengjiu, who was dressed like a teenager, the more she felt that this was a mischievous girl. How could this be a teenager? However, not only did she dress up very well, even her mannerisms and demeanor did not have a trace of a girl's coquettishness. Thinking of how she handled the pheasants neatly and how she said that she often ran outside just to find her mother, her heart tightened. She forced herself to hold back the tears in her eyes. Even if she really wanted to confirm it, even if she really wanted to pull her into her arms and ask her everything, even if she really wanted to hear her call her mother, she held it all back at this moment. Chapter 1448. She also wanted to reunite with her family. However, after so many years had passed, she didn't dare to think about this idea. She had just said that her father always took her mother's things and missed her. So, after so many years he still hadn't remarried? His memories had clearly been sealed, so how could he recall them? She saw Shangguan Rong's expression and saw her sitting there absent-mindedly. She didn't even react when the pheasant roasted over the fire was slightly charred. Seeing this, she took the branch from her hand and looked at her, asking, Martial Uncle Shangguan, you still haven't told me. Will my mother come home with me? Hearing Fengjiu's voice, Shangguan Wanrong came back to her senses. She raised her sleeve to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes and adjusted her mind. She suppressed the ups and downs in her heart and stared at her. She will go back with you, but not now. Hearing this, Fengjiu stared at her. When their eyes met, the layer of paper that hadn't been broken seemed to have disappeared in front of them. They had guessed each other's identities but hadn't recognized each other. After a long time, Fengjiu lowered her eyes. I know. It should be about that 3 Yangzi. In the end, what did that 3 Yangzi want to do? Seeing her lower her eyes and the smile on her face, Shangguan Wanrong hurriedly said, she will definitely go back. When she's done with her matters, she will definitely go back. I promise. I believe you. She raised her eyes and smiled, nodding. Not long after, the roasted pheasant was cooked. She added some seasoning and handed it to her. Try it. Thank you. Shangguan Wanrong took it and softly thanked her. She tore off a piece and ate it. The two people chatted while eating the roasted pheasant. Perhaps because they had opened their mouths, although they hadn't broken through the layer of paper, the feeling and atmosphere of getting along was a bit different. After eating the roasted pheasant, the two people continued to walk forward. This time Shangguan Wanrong took the initiative to say, among the 3 herbs my Shizhuan asked me to collect, one is red mountain stone iron. This kind of spiritual herb grows in the cracks of the stone walls and can only be found in those steep mountain walls. Later I'll go halfway up the mountain to take a look. You stay up there and wait. Shirtaying Shan Hong? This is an extremely rare elixir. There must be a guardian beast next to such an elixir. Moreover, it's located halfway up the mountain. Most of them are poisonous snakes. As Fengjiu spoke, he frowned. Since we're going to mine the Taiying Red Mountain, then I'll go down and do it. I recognize this spirit medicine. No, it's too dangerous. I'll go down. Don't worry. It's not my first time picking herbs, so I'll be fine. She directly refused. When she reached the top, she took out a thick rope from her space and tied it around her body. I've already prepared everything before I came here. Everything is complete and I've also taken the antidote beforehand. Hearing her say this, Fengjiu had no choice but to take the rope in her hand and tie it firmly to her body. He said, then be careful. I'll wait for you up there. Tie one side of the rope to the big tree here. As she spoke, she tied the other end of the rope to the big tree next to her. She said, if there's anything, call me or pull the rope. Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong revealed a gentle and soft smile. I know. You don't have to worry. Wait for me here. You also have to be careful of the surroundings in case there are ferocious beasts. Chapter 1449. No need, I have some. She stuffed it back to her, but she stuffed it back in. Take it, Shangguan Wanrong said. After glancing at her, she turned around and walked to the side. I'm going down. Looking at the pill bottles in her hand, Fengjiu smiled and put them away, and I'll help you pull the rope. As she said this, she pulled the rope from the side, allowing her to borrow strength to descend. This 10,000 medicine mountain was very high. From the time they circled around to the top, it took them 2 days. She didn't even know where the stone iron red mountain was growing. Because looking up from the bottom of the mountain, there was a layer of fog in the air that blocked their line of sight. Looking down from the top of the mountain was the same. They couldn't see from a distance, so they could only go down and check it out bit by bit. She used a full half an hour to descend with just the rope. When she walked to the edge and looked down, she could no longer see her mother's figure because it was blocked by the fog. I wonder what's down there? It's really too dangerous like this. She softly muttered, feeling a bit uneasy. The stone iron red mountain was a pill that could prolong one's life. It was one of the main ingredients needed to refine the life essence pill. Because it was extremely rare, it was hard to find it at a high price even in the auction house outside. Could it be that 3 Yangzi wanted to use this medicine to refine a pill that could prolong one's life? However, ordinary life essence pills shouldn't have any effect on 3 Yangzi. According to what she knew, 3 Yangzi was already several hundred years old. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard rustling sounds. She turned around to look. She didn't know when, but more than 10 monkeys had scuttled out from the tree. They were all squeaking and some even wanted to untie the rope tied to the tree. Scram! Fengjiu sternly shouted. She raised her hand and a wave of pressure attacked those monkeys. Perhaps they were afraid of the ancient divine beast's pressure in her body, but after those monkeys were pushed back several meters, they didn't dare to move forward. Instead, they scattered and fled in all directions. She sat under the big tree with the rope tied to it. She held the rope with one hand and sensed the movement below from the tightness of the rope and the rhythm of its shaking. At the same time, Shangguan Wanrong, who descended, was searching all over the stone wall, and her eyes lit up when she saw a spirit herb growing between the cracks of a stone, causing her expression to be filled with delight. It's sure tying Shan Hong. Looking at the spirit herb that was 2 meters away from her, she held the rope with both hands and pushed off the mountain wall with her feet. Then she took a deep breath and used the force of her feet pushing off the mountain wall to swing the rope in that direction. Fengjiu, who was on top of the rope, felt that the rope was shaking violently. He was slightly startled and quickly got up to the side and shouted, "Marshal Uncle Shangguan, are you all right?" "It's okay, I found sure tying Shan Hong." Shangguan Wanrong, who was halfway up the mountain, raised her voice and replied. Her body swayed and came to this side. She just happened to be on the other side of the stone crack, but she didn't immediately approach. There was bound to be a guardian beast next to a top-grade spirit herb like this. If she went forward to pick it, she could lose her life at any time. As a result, she flipped her hand and took out a gold coin and threw it at the stone crack. Only a clang was heard as the coin fell. A black figure scuttled out with a whoosh and bit the gold coin. Chapter 1450. Black Gold Snake. One drop of its venom can kill a ferocious beast, and the snake's gallbladder is even better. Since I've encountered it, I'll catch it while I'm at it. Shangguan Wanrong softly murmured, her gaze fixed on the small snake that glowed with an oily black light. In the next moment, she first applied the medicine on her hand, then used the strength of the rope to swing forward, instantly grabbing the small snake's head. At the same time, Fengjiu, who was waiting above, faintly heard the sound coming from below. Although the sound drifted in the wind and wasn't clear, knowing that she was down there, he could rest assured. She waited above for about the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before she felt the rope vibrate. Guessing that her mother had already picked the herbs, She hurriedly retracted the rope and pulled her back from below the steep wall. About an hour later she was pulled up from below. Fengjie went forward to take a look. Seeing that apart from her clothes being rubbed and dirty, there were no wounds, he secretly let out a sigh of relief. "Are you okay? Did you pick the herbs?" Fengjie asked while helping her untie the rope. "I picked them. Look, this is the stone tai ing shan hong, one of the essential main ingredients for refining the life essence pill." Shangguan Wanrong lightly smiled and took out the spiritual herb she picked to show Fengjie, then said, "I also caught the stone tai ing shan hong's guardian snake. It's a black gold snake." Hearing this, Fengjie was startled and his heart jumped. The black gold snake is highly venomous and its reaction is extremely fast. "You weren't bitten, right?" "Oh, it's fast. My speed is faster than it." She smiled as she put away the spiritual herb, patted her clothes and said, "I still need 2 more herbs to find them." Hearing this, Fengjie said, "What are those 2 herbs? I can help you find them." Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong slightly smiled. "Although you're quite familiar with spiritual herbs and have been delivering spiritual herbs on the peak for some time, those herbs are extremely rare even in the sect. Even if you see them, you won't necessarily recognize them." Because those 3 herbs were something she had never seen before. "If you don't tell me, how do you know I won't recognize them?" She smiled slyly and looked at her with a pair of smiling eyes, proudly saying, "I'm very powerful, there's no spiritual herb that I don't recognize." Shangguan Wanrong heard this and asked, "So, you've really learned it?" "And I've learned it." Fengjie nodded. He was very confident. Was. However, judging from the current situation, although the stone iron echoing mountain red was one of the essential herbs for the life essence pill, it was just that. She didn't know how many other herbs were needed. Even she didn't know what kind of pill the final pill would be, but she was sure that it had something to do with the life essence pill. Seeing this, Shangguan Wanrong glanced at her and took out a folded piece of paper from her space. "These are the 3 herbs I'm looking for." Fengjie took it and opened it. She saw 3 spiritual herbs drawn on the white paper with their names and growth habits. The first one was the freshly picked stone tai ing shan hong. The second is the flower of longevity, and the third is the 7-leaf grass. Chapter 1451. Yes, it's these 3 herbs. Speaking of which, I've been practicing alchemy for so long, but this is the first time I've seen these 3 herbs. If my master hadn't marked out the growth habits of these herbs, it would have been really difficult to find these 3 herbs in this huge mountain of 1,000 herbs. Speaking of this, she smiled. "But it's okay, I finally found the first one." "Then, does Martial Uncle know the medicinal properties of the longevity flower and the 7-leaf variant grass?" Fengjie looked at her and asked. "I once heard that Master 3 Yangzi once suffered a fatal internal injury. In recent years his internal injury has worsened and he doesn't have much time left. And this stone iron reflection mountain red is a necessary ingredient to refine the life essence pill. I guess the other 2 ingredients should also be used to refine the life essence pill. He probably wants to use these pills to refine a pill that can cure his internal injuries and prolong his life." Her voice paused and she hesitated. "But after all, my cultivation in alchemy is far inferior to his. Even if I know these 3 herbs, I don't know what kind of vitality pill he wants to refine. Martial Uncle Duan told Martial Uncle not to collect these herbs, otherwise you'll lose your life. Martial Uncle, have you never thought that perhaps in addition to these pills, the Peak Master might want your life?" Fengjie directly pointed out the most important point. But even she didn't know why it was her mother. Could it be that there was something on her mother that 3 Yangzi wanted? She always had a feeling that something was wrong when 3 Yangzi took her as his last disciple and brought her into the sect, but didn't hold the apprenticeship ceremony and didn't allow her to go down the mountain. It was as if he was afraid that she would escape. Shangguan Wanrong's eyes flashed slightly and she smiled. "Don't worry, I'll pay attention to this. We can't find the answer here. We'll only know when we return to the peak." "Okay." Fengjie responded and went to find the other 2 spiritual herbs with her. In his mind he was thinking about what kind of pill would be formed when these 3 herbs were mixed and refined. A few days later, Qin Dao and the others finished concocting a batch of pills, then went looking for more spirit ingredients. "Actually, we should go to the 10,000 medicine mountain. There are precious spirit medicines there." "Unfortunately," an alchemist said. His eyes were filled with yearning and fear. There were a lot of spirit herbs in that place, but there were also a lot of dangers. For alchemists like them who only cultivated spirit energy and not battle prowess, the strength of a gold core cultivator was not even comparable to the battle prowess of a foundation establishment cultivator. With such battle prowess, it was hard to say when they would die inside. However, when they thought of the spiritual herbs on the 10,000 Medicine Mountain, their hearts itched unbearably. Just think about it. Whatever you do, you have to do it within your capabilities. Don't compare yourself with others. We don't have that kind of strength. Qingdao glanced at them and said. He leaned against the tree and drank some water to moisten his throat. Just as he was about to relax and take a nap, he felt the ground tremble slightly as if something was running towards them. What was that sound? Someone asked in shock. He hurriedly laid down on the ground to listen for any movement. Once he heard it, the sound that sounded like 10,000 horses galloping caused his expression to change. It sounds like a beast tied. What? A beast tied? When everyone heard this, they stood up with pale faces. Even Qingdao and Luo Heng's faces were full of shock and astonishment. Seeing that everyone was still in a daze, Qingdao immediately shouted, "Run! What are you waiting for?" Chapter 1452. Everyone reacted and quickly fled with Qingdao. However, right behind them, a cacophony of sounds like 10,000 horses galloping could be heard. The loud bangs were accompanied by the sounds of trees being knocked down and the roars and roars of ferocious beasts and spirit beasts. The sounds echoed in the forest. A slower alchemist was hit by a ferocious beast and flew into the air. He screamed and fell into the herd of beasts, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Hiss! Looking back, Qingdao and the rest were stunned. They sucked in a cold breath but did not dare to slow down. Run! Quick! Fly on your swords! Seeing tens of thousands of beasts surging towards them from behind, they all jumped onto their flying swords and changed to flying swords. However, because the trees in the forest were messy and there was a restriction in the sky, the height that they could fly was also limited. Under this kind of situation, they had to avoid the trees in front of them and also had to quickly escape for their lives. To these pill masters, they were already panicking. Ah! A cry of alarm was heard. A flying alchemist crashed into a tree and fell to the ground. He rolled and crawled as he cried for help. Save me, save me! The others did not even care about running for their lives. Why would they save him? They only glanced downwards in panic before abandoning the place. Qingdao saw this and gritted his teeth. He turned back and rushed towards that person. Senior brother Qin, do you want to die? Luo Heng shouted. He found it unbelievable that Qingdao was going to save that person. You go first, Qingdao said without turning back. He turned back on his sword and reached out to pull up the alchemist who could not stand up due to fear. Get up quickly. The alchemist was so shocked that his face turned pale. His body was trembling and he was terrified. He tried to stand up but he couldn't. Qingdao even pulled him up onto the flying sword, but he couldn't stand up and fell down again. Get up quickly. Quick! Qingdao shouted and pulled him up again. Seeing this, Luo Heng struggled in his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, so be it. He also turned back and took out his sword. He injected spiritual energy into it and attacked the incoming ferocious beasts, trying to buy more time for Qingdao to save the alchemist. After a few breaths, Qingdao finally brought the alchemist up onto his flying sword. He shouted at Luo Heng, let's go quickly. As a result, the two of them quickly caught up with the person in front of them on their flying swords. Behind Qingdao stood the alchemist he had saved. However, the beast tide was not only the ferocious beasts, there were also ferocious beasts and spiritual beasts in the air. It was as if something was chasing them from behind. Be careful. It's a red-billed blood eagle. When Qingdao saw the group of red-billed blood eagles in front of him, he wanted to slow down and avoid them. Who would have thought that a lone red-billed blood eagle would attack them from behind? Luo Heng let out a low cry and quickly dodged. Just as Qingdao was about to dodge, he suddenly felt someone grab his robe from behind and push him in the direction of the red-billed blood eagle. I don't want to die. Chapter 1453. Ah! Qingdao cried out in alarm. Due to the force coming from behind him, he was unable to stop himself from falling forward. He saw the red-billed blood eagle raise its sharp beak and fiercely peck at his lumbar vertebrae as he fell forward. In an instant his face turned pale as a heart-wrenching pain assaulted him. He could only hear the sound of his bones breaking. It was so crisp and clear that it was transmitted into his mind. Immediately after, he was stepped on by the red-billed blood eagle and fell from the sky. Before he fell unconscious, he seemed to have heard Luo Heng's shocked and angry cry. Senior brother Chen. Luo Heng angrily cried out in alarm. Looking at the person who was fleeing on Chen Dao's flying sword, he fiercely cursed, "Bastard." Just as he cursed, he saw the red-billed blood eagle chase after that person. Not long after, that alchemist let out a blood-curdling scream as his entire head was pecked off by the red-billed blood eagle. In an instant, fresh blood splattered in the air and filled the air. "Serves you right to die a horrible death." He cursed angrily and turned around to look for Chen Dao. However, what he saw was that Chen Dao had fallen into a small ditch in the forest. Although he had avoided the miserable fate of being trampled by tens of thousands of beasts, his heart still sank when he saw Chen Dao lying there motionless and covered in blood. He seemed to have heard the sound of him being pecked by the blood eagle's beak. Where exactly was he hurt? He didn't dare to go down because all he could see were beasts. If he went down, he would definitely be trampled flat. Fortunately, those beasts ran past and didn't stop. After those beasts ran past, he looked around to make sure that there was no danger before going down. Senior brother Chen. Senior brother Chen. Among so many people, Chen Dao was the most righteous person. Even if he was greedy for life and afraid of death, he couldn't bear to see such a person abandoned here. He had clearly saved someone, but that person turned around and repaid his kindness with enmity and pushed him to his death. Human nature was selfish, but when he saw it with his own eyes and experienced it for himself, he realized that that kind of selfishness could chill one's heart. He wanted to help Chen Dao up from the ravine, but the ravine was only wide enough for a person and half a meter deep. It would take a lot of effort to help him up. Moreover, he was afraid that if he carelessly helped him up, it would worsen his injuries. For a moment he didn't know what to do. Senior brother Chen. Senior brother Chen. He shouted from the side. Seeing that this was not a solution, he could only fly to the top of the trench on his flying sword. He squatted down and pulled him out from the trench by his robes and placed him aside. This method was similar to hanging him up. Even if his bones were dislocated, he shouldn't move too much. Putting away his flying sword, he quickly examined him, especially the lumbar vertebrae that he had heard the sound of cracking. When his hand touched the lumbar vertebrae, his heart turned cold as if it had sunk to the bottom of a valley. Those who knew alchemy more or less knew some medical skills. With this examination, he found out that other than the internal injuries he suffered when he was trampled by the blood eagle, the most serious injury was the lumbar vertebrae. Everyone knew how important the lumbar vertebrae were. It was the support point for a person to stand up. But now this support point was actually. Chapter 1454. Senior brother Chen, I can only stabilize your internal injuries first. As for your lumbar spine, we can only wait until we return to the sect to ask someone to treat it. Luo Heng sighed and said, Fortunately, it won't be long before we leave. Otherwise your injuries would still. It's really worrying. At the same time, on the top of the mountain of 1,000 medicine, Shangguan Wanrong and Fengjiu, who had already collected the 3 spiritual herbs they needed, were heading down the mountain. When they were on the mountain, they heard a loud bang below. For some reason, the entire forest seemed to shake and a wave of beasts surged. The ferocious beasts and spiritual beasts in the depths of the forest roared and rushed to the periphery. Some also came up the mountain. Looking at the strange phenomenon, the two of them were very puzzled. Why would a beast tide suddenly appear? And those ferocious beasts seemed to be running away from something. And that loud bang, what on earth was going on? Did that sound like the sound of an exploding pill furnace? Shangguan Wanrong asked. As soon as she spoke, she came back to her senses and chuckled. Yes, you don't know how to refine pills. How would you know what the sound of an exploding pill furnace is? Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and narrowed her eyes, saying, I know how to refine pills. It's just that I didn't refine pills in the sect. I'm very familiar with the sound of an exploding pill furnace because I've also broken many furnaces. That sound just now was the sound of an exploding pill furnace. Someone should be refining pills below. But who would refine pills below the mountain of 1,000 medicine? Eldest senior brother and the others definitely wouldn't. Could it be someone from another peak? She murmured with a trace of doubt on her face. After walking down for a while, perhaps the smell of medicine in the air was diffusing with the wind. Fengjiu, who was walking beside Shangguan Wanrong, stopped and looked down. This smell of medicine. What's wrong? Shangguan Wanrong saw her stop and asked. The smell of medicine in the air is poisonous, Fengjiu said slowly, squinting and looking down. Sure enough, someone is refining pills below. And I'm afraid it's a poisonous pill. To be able to make so many ferocious beasts rush out, this poison is very unusual and extremely overbearing. Poison? Shangguan Wanrong was startled, her expression strange. You know it's poisonous just by smelling it? She sniffed and said, the smell of medicine in the air has already dispersed. It's very faint and even I can't tell what kind of poison is in it. As she spoke, she was a little worried, so she took out a pill and gave it to her. This is an antidote pill that I refined. Take one. Even if it's not poisonous, you'll be fine. Of course, because I'm not only an alchemist, I'm also a doctor. Fengjiu chuckled. He seemed to be in a good mood. You can keep this. I'm already immune to poison, so there's no need to call it an antidote pill. Ordinary poisons won't affect me. Shangguan Wanrong listened and looked at her in a daze. Ordinary poisons couldn't harm her? Was this for real? Could it be that she was also in danger over there? Someone often poisoned her? So much so that she was now immune to poison? Let's go. Let's go down and take a look. Maybe that person hasn't gone far. Chapter 1455. When they came down to search, they found a place in the dense forest at the foot of the mountain. There were traces of a barrier that had been set up before being removed. In that place, the aura in the air had not completely dissipated, and the smell of medicine was much stronger than in other places in the forest. It's here, Fengjiu said and walked in to take a look. She saw that there were traces of a pill furnace exploding on the ground. The fragments of the pill furnace had already been cleaned up. Aside from the traces on the ground, there were no other fragments to be seen. Even the person refining the pill was not seen. She slowly walked inside and looked around. When her foot stepped on a piece of metal inserted into the soil, she stopped and squatted down to take a look. A fragment of the pill furnace was half buried in the sand. When she took it out to take a look, there were still some residual medicinal dregs on the fragment. This person should have wanted to refine a 5th-tier pill or above. However, the pill furnace couldn't withstand it and exploded. She handed the pill furnace to her mother. There are still medicinal dregs on it. From the medicinal dregs, you can tell that it was a 5th-tier pill or above. However, he failed. Shangguan Wanrong took the fragment and carefully looked at it. When her gaze fell on the veined patterns on the fragment, her eyes involuntarily shrank and a trace of fear flashed through her eyes. Seeing her expression, Fengjiu's eyes flashed and asked, Martial Ant, do you recognize this pill furnace fragment? No, I don't recognize it. Shangguan Wanrong shook her head. She held the fragment of the pill furnace tightly in her hand. He seemed to be lost in thought. Seeing this, Fengjiu didn't ask any more questions. After looking around for a while, she said, this person should have already left. Let's go too. It could be guessed that her mother recognized the fragment of the pill furnace. She should know who was refining the pill here. Since she didn't want to say, then she wouldn't ask. Let's go outside. She put away the fragment and collected her expression. She walked outside with Fengjiu. Not long after the two left, a figure walked out of a cave halfway up the mountain. He stood there and watched the two leave. After a long time, he turned around and entered the cave. When the two of them were heading outside, they met Duan Mubai, who was heading inside. Junior sister, are you all right? When Duan Mubai saw the two of them, he stepped forward and naturally ignored Fengjiu. His concerned gaze landed on Shangguan Wanrong. Fengjiu coughed lightly when she saw this, and she didn't wait for her mother to speak before she smiled and said, Martial Uncle Duan, you really care about us. But there's no need to worry, Martial Uncle Shangguan and I are fine. Since her father wasn't here, she would chase away the wild bees and butterflies by her mother's side. Upon hearing Fengjiu's words, Duan Mubai glanced at him and said in a deep voice, Why are you interrupting when the elders are talking? Go to the side and stay there. In his heart he felt that this little handyman was too insensible. His unhappy gaze retracted from Fengjiu and landed on Shangguan Wanrong. I don't know why, but there was a beast tied in this mystic realm. Fortunately, it has already calmed down. Now that I see that you're fine, I'm relieved. I've made senior brother worry, Shangguan Wanrong said, glancing at Fengjiu and smiling at him. Chapter 1456. Eldest senior brother, are you done with your work? Shangguan Wanrong looked at Duan Mubai and asked. Yes, it's done. Because of the beast tide, many people have rushed to the periphery to gather. I saw that you weren't around, so I came over to take a look. As he spoke, he glanced at Fengjiu and said, since there's nothing else, then follow me to the periphery. Alright, we're going to the periphery as well, Shangguan Wanrong said and gestured to Fengjiu, and the two of them walked forward together. Duan Mubai, who was following behind, saw this and could not help but feel that it was strange. Why did junior sister treat this odd job worker so differently? The intimacy in their actions and the change in their expressions, it seemed like something had happened between the two of them. When he thought of this, his expression became strange and he suppressed the doubts in his heart as they walked out together. However, 2 days later the time for the transportation was up. Before they could reach the periphery, a vortex appeared in midair and sucked them in one by one. As long as the alchemists were still alive in the mystic realm, they would all be transported out. As for those who were dead, they would be buried in this mystic realm forever. When Fengjiu, Shangguan Wanrong and Duan Mubai were transported out, they appeared at the foot of Three Yang Peak. I'm going to see Master, you guys go back first, he said to Fengjiu and Duan Mubai. Fengjiu was silent when he heard this. He did not have the right to go to the 9th peak, so he did not say anything and only looked at her. Duan Mubai paused for a moment when he heard this, then said, I'm going to see Master too, I'll go with you. Shangguan Wanrong nodded when she saw this. All right. Then she looked at Fengjiu. You go back and rest first. All right, Fengjiu replied, and his eyes flashed as he watched the two of them turn around and leave. As they walked up the mountain, Duan Mubai could not help but ask, Junior sister, this Fengjiu seems to be to your liking? I see that you seem to treat him more warmly than others. Shangguan Wanrong smiled when she heard this, and her eyes were filled with joy and gentleness. That's right. This child is really obedient. Seeing the gentle smile on her face, his heart trembled slightly. After pausing for a moment, he changed the topic and asked, That's right, you gave those 3 medicines to Shizhuan. It's best if you don't go see Shizhuan alone for the time being. Hearing this, the smile on Shangguan Wanrong's face faded. She tilted her head slightly to look at Duan Mubai and stopped to ask, Eldest senior brother, do you know something? Are you really not going to tell me? Duan Mubai sighed. It's not that I don't want to tell you, but I don't know where to start and I don't even know how to tell you. He shook his head and said, I only hope that you will be more cautious when you return to the peak and pay more attention. Okay, I got it. She replied and continued walking. Duan Mubai glanced at her and followed beside her, saying, If you want to see Master in the future, just call me along. Shangguan Wanrong smiled and did not reply. Instead, she looked at the entrance of the 9th summit and asked with sparkling eyes, Eldest senior brother, what do you think Master is doing right now? Will he be in the summit? Master often goes into seclusion to refine pills and rarely goes out. If he's not in the summit, where would he be? He looked at her with slight surprise, feeling that her question was a bit strange. Chapter 1457. The Peak Master has ordered that aside from Shangguan Wanrong, no one else is allowed to enter without being summoned. As the 2 nascent soul cultivators spoke, they stopped Duan Mubai, who was about to step inside. Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong, who was in front, stopped and looked back. Duan Mubai frowned. What's the reason? If junior martial sister can go in, why can't I? You go in and report that I have something to see Master. We are only responsible for carrying out the Peak Master's orders. You can wait here, but you can't go in. As the 2 nascent soul cultivators spoke, they were expressionless and refused to let him go. Shangguan Wanrong smiled when she saw this. Eldest senior brother, it's fine. I'll come out after I see Master. You can go back first. As she spoke, she nodded slightly to him before moving to walk into the room. The moment she turned around, the smile on her face gradually disappeared and she looked thoughtful. Seeing this, Duan Mubai's face darkened. Facing the 2 nascent soul cultivators guarding him, he couldn't force his way in and could only wait outside. On the other side, when Shangguan Wanrong arrived outside the bamboo house, she couldn't help but stop. Just as she was hesitating, she heard her master's voice from inside. Since you're here, why don't you come in? Yangzi's old and low voice came from the bamboo house, pulling Shangguan Wanrong's thoughts back. She adjusted her mind, then pushed the door open and walked in. Master. She looked at the figure sitting there and respectfully bowed. Then she took out the 3 best quality herbs from her space and said, Master, this disciple has completed the task. The 3 herbs are all here. Master, please take a look. Yangzi turned around and looked at her with a dignified expression on his aged face. He stroked his beard with one hand and checked the 3 elixirs on the table. And the roots are intact and properly preserved. Very good. He nodded in satisfaction, and after seeing the 3 elixirs on the table, his stern face finally softened. His gaze paused on Shangguan Wanrong for a while before he asked, You haven't broken through your skills yet? You shouldn't have stayed at the golden core stage for so long. Didn't you take the medicinal pills that Master gave you to help you improve your strength? I haven't had the time to eat since I entered the mystic realm. She lowered her eyes and said, Then put aside all the matters at hand and increase your strength first. When you enter the nascent soul stage, I have something very important for you to do. He put the pill away and then took out another bottle of pills. Take this. Take 1 pill every 10 days. It can increase your strength to the nascent soul stage in 3 months. Within 3 months. She was slightly startled. Isn't this advancement speed a little too fast? If that's the case, I'm afraid that my foundation will be unstable, and it will be difficult for me to advance in the future. There's no need for that. This is a medicinal pill that I've personally refined for you. It's only beneficial to your body. Don't worry. He waved his hand and said, Also, you can't tell your senior martial brothers about this. Otherwise they will say that I'm biased towards you. Remember my words. Within 3 months you must become a nascent soul cultivator. Hearing this, her eyes flashed and she asked, But what if I can't break through in 3 months and become a nascent soul cultivator? Chapter 1458. You won't be able to enter within 3 months? Yangzi looked at her and suddenly laughed. You've been here for some time now. Have you heard of a place called the Wasteland of Extreme Evil? He paused and laughed. Perhaps you haven't heard of it, but it's all right. I can tell you that the Wasteland of Extreme Evil is just like its name. It's a place where evil people gather. They eat human flesh, drink human blood, and commit all kinds of evil deeds. Only powerful people can protect their lives there. I think that it's also the best place for people to train. I believe that under such harsh living conditions a person's potential can be stimulated, and entering the nascent soul stage will be very easy. What do you think? Hearing those words, Shangguan Wanrong could not help but shiver. She looked at the strange and dangerous expression on her master's face, who was clearly smiling, but the smile did not reach his eyes. That gaze and that smile gave her an extremely frightening and dangerous feeling. She could not help but take a step back and maintain some distance from him. I understand. Don't worry, Master. I will advance to the nascent soul stage within 3 months. I will definitely not disappoint Master's expectations of me. She steadied her mind and bowed. If Master doesn't have any other instructions, I'll take my leave first. Go. He nodded in satisfaction and gestured for her to leave. Shangguan Wanrong walked out and closed the door behind her. She felt her heart tremble and a chill run up from the soles of her feet. Now she was very sure that her master wanted her life. However, she didn't know why. Why did he want her life? What use did her life have to him? Why did he have to wait until she entered the nascent soul stage and became a nascent soul cultivator? She walked out of the 9th peak in a daze as she thought about it. She only regained her senses when she heard Duan Mubai's voice. Junior sister, are you all right? Duan Mubai walked up to her. He couldn't help but worry when he saw her dazed expression. I'm fine. What could happen if I went to Master's place? She looked up at him and shook her head with a smile. Eldest senior brother, I'll take my leave first. With that, she walked past him and returned to her cave abode. Watching her leave, Duan Mubai wanted to call her back and ask her what Master had said to her after she went in. However, as he watched her walk away, he opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Even if he suspected that his master would do something bad to her, nothing had happened. As a disciple, how could he ask such a question? Sighing softly, he shook his head and followed her down the mountain. On the other side, when Fengjie returned to her cave abode, she saw Green Hair, who had gained a lot of weight, pouncing on her. Seeing Green Hair, she was a little surprised. So you're here. I was wondering why I didn't see you when I entered the secret realm. So you can't get in? She chuckled. Since she hadn't bathed yet, she directly sat down at the entrance of the cave. She hugged green hair in her arms and stroked its egg. Puzzled, she asked, "When are you planning to lay this egg? Normally, eggs can't be carried for so long, right?" Green hair raised its head and cackled, flapping its wings and saying something. Seeing this, Fengjio's eyes turned. Should she take out a speech-opening pill and let green hair eat it? Chapter 1459. She stroked green hair's round body and touched the egg under its belly. She thought, my mother should be fine if she goes to 3 Yangzi's place in 3 Yangzi's. No matter what, 3 Yangzi wouldn't let himself be labeled as a person who murdered his disciple. Even if he wanted to make a move on my mother, he would probably do it in private. However, under such circumstances, her mother was only a gold core cultivator. She was not at ease dealing with the 3 Yangzi. If she could send her away first and go to Ling Shuang and the others, perhaps it would be easier for her to deal with the remaining matters. Moreover, only when her mother left this place and was safe would she be able to do what she wanted to do without worry. She sat there deep in thought. The green-furred cat in her arms was pressed down by her. It couldn't even straighten its head, so it could only lie quietly in her arms. After a long time, Fengjio stood up. She let go of green hair and went into the cave. She planned to rest for a while and bathe in the evening when there was no one around. In this place, bathing was not very convenient for her. There was no bathroom in the cave. She could only bathe in the middle of the night when there was no one around. However, when it was about evening, she was still resting in the cave when she heard Luo Heng's voice from outside. "Fengjio? Fengjio?" Luo Heng shouted outside and asked worriedly, "Are you still alive?" Hearing this, she jumped out of bed. She put on her coat and walked out angrily. When she saw the person shouting outside, she said, "What do you mean I'm still alive? Could it be that the person you see now is not me but a ghost?" He paused for a moment and waved his hand. No, that's not what I meant. I just wanted to see if you're still alive." Luo Heng then asked, "Didn't you encounter the beast tide at that time? You were in the depths. How could you not be injured at all?" Fengjio nodded and said, "I encountered it. I was at the top of the mountain and saw thousands of beasts running out from below." "Oh right, where's senior brother Chen? Is he okay?" Hearing this, the smile on Luo Heng's face disappeared. "Senior brother Chen, what happened to him?" Seeing his strange expression, although he tried his best to hide it, he was still caught by her. "What happened to him? Tell me," Fengjio urged. Her heart sank as she thought to herself, could it be that Qin Dao is dead? If he encountered a beast tide, the death rate would be unusually low. Seeing that Fengjio kept asking, Luo Heng sighed and told him in detail what had happened at that time. "After I brought him back, I asked the people in the peak to treat him. However, they only knew how to refine pills and could not fix his bones. There was even a doctor and an alchemist who said that senior brother Qin Dao might not be able to stand up again in this lifetime because his spine was injured. Moreover, they said that he had already missed the best time to treat him." Fengjio frowned. "Where's he now? I'll go see him. I just sent him back to the cave, but he's very agitated. He can't accept the fact that he'll never be able to stand up. He's smashing things in the cave and won't listen to me. I think it's better if you don't go in case you get injured." Chapter 1460. Fengjio's eyes flickered. He didn't say anything else as he walked towards Qin Dao's abode. Qin Dao had helped her a lot on Sanyang Peak. If he really couldn't stand up, then not to mention that he wouldn't be able to bear the consequences, even she wouldn't allow such a situation to occur. "Hey Fengjio, what are you going to do?" Luo Heng couldn't help but say when he saw her leave, "You don't have to go to Qin Dao's abode. He won't see anyone right now, so it's pointless for anyone to go." "How would I know if it's pointless if I don't take a look? What's the point of going there? You don't know this, but the Grand Elder went to take a look after Qin Dao was in trouble. Qin Dao is related to the Grand Elder in some way." After seeing Qin Dao's condition, the Grand Elder only said one thing, and that was the greatest blow. Her footsteps paused when she heard this and she asked, "What did he say?" Luo Heng stopped as well and said, "After the Grand Elder asked a few doctors and alchemists to take a look at Qin Dao's condition, he found out that Qin Dao's spine was heavily injured and wouldn't be able to stand for the rest of his life. He said that he would notify the clansmen to take him back so that Qin Dao could retire to the Qin clan. He sighed when he spoke up to this point. Tell me, if Qin Dao is really sent back to the clan like this, then how would he retire? He's clearly going back to await death, but what can he do now? Even the Grand Elder has given up on him. Moreover, once news of this spread, some of the people who were on good terms with him distanced themselves from him. They didn't even look at him after returning from the secret realm. Thinking back to when he was at his peak, those people were all calling him Senior Brother Qin, begging him to give them pointers on the Tao of alchemy or to exchange pills. Now those people are all avoiding him. I'm the only one who still has a conscience. Fengjiu's expression was indifferent when he heard this, and he said, there are many who add flowers to embroidery, but few who offer help in times of need. That's human nature. With that, he continued walking forward. But you won't be of much use even if you go. You're just a lowly odd job worker. You don't know how to refine pills and you don't know how to use medicine. If you go, you'll only make him sad. Along the way, Luo Heng kept chattering like a little sparrow. Fengjiu could not stand it anymore and glared at him. Are you done? Haven't you had enough? It's your business if you don't want to go, but it's my business if I go. Why do you keep stopping me? Luo Heng was taken aback by the scolding. He looked at Fengjiu, who had stopped in his tracks and continued walking forward after shouting at him. He scratched his head in a daze. This brat, he gave me a fright. Doesn't he know that he's just an errand boy? Why are you speaking so loudly? Are you trying to scare me to death? In front of Qin Dao's cave, Fengjiu stopped and looked at the cave that was protected by a boundary. She sighed softly in her heart. She still remembered that when they were going to enter the secret realm, he had given her a jade pendant. A jade pendant that allowed her to freely enter and exit his cave. She did not expect that the jade pendant would come in handy like this in the end. Just as she was about to walk in, Luo Heng grabbed her arm. Are you stupid? Don't you see the boundary? If he doesn't open it, we can't go in. After I sent him back, I came back a few times, but I could only shout from outside and follow the Grand Elder in a few times. Chapter 1461. Luo Heng was startled. He watched as Fengjiu walked forward. When he passed by the boundary disappeared. Luo Heng couldn't help but follow closely behind him. Why didn't you tell me earlier that you had this thing? You made me come here for nothing. He couldn't help but complain. However, when he entered the cave and felt the dead silence, he couldn't help but shut his noisy mouth. Fengjiu looked at the things that were scattered all over the floor. In addition to some commonly used items, there were also some elixirs and the like. When she passed by the alchemy room, she saw that the shelves where the herbs were placed were also scattered all over the floor. She stopped and asked in a low voice, he can't get up. Why are the things here so messy? Even the spiritual herbs are scattered all over the floor? Don't you know? Didn't he get injured in the secret realm? When he came back, he was conscious. After he was sent back, he started to struggle. He smashed everything within his reach. I reckon that after we left, he smashed everything and even the shelves in the alchemy room. As he spoke, he poked his head inside and said in a low voice, why is it so quiet? Could something have happened to him? Hearing this, Fengjiu quickly walked inside. When she arrived at his bedroom, she saw Qin Dao lying on the floor. His forehead was bleeding and he had fainted. Seeing this, Fengjiu's heart sank. She quickly walked forward and said, quick, help him onto the bed. Oh. Luo Heng seemed to be frightened. He hurriedly responded and helped Fengjiu carry Qin Dao onto the bed. He hurriedly ran out and shouted, I'll get a doctor. Fengjiu didn't even have time to say anything. Luo Heng opened the boundary formation of the cave and rushed outside. Seeing this, she could only check Qin Dao's body. She first checked his pulse and found that his internal injuries had not completely healed. Just as Luo Heng said, the most serious injury was his lumbar spine. She took out a pill from the space and stuffed it into his mouth. Then she used her spiritual power to help him digest the pill and treat the wound on his forehead. After about an incense stick of time, he slowly woke up. Senior Brother Qin, it's me. Fengjiu, how are you feeling now? She asked slowly. Seeing that his eyes were still, she couldn't help but say, don't worry, your lumbar spine is fine. As long as it's healed, you'll be fine. He was telling the truth. However, to Qin Dao it sounded like Fengjiu was comforting him. Hence, he remained expressionless and muttered, I'm a useless person. I'm useless. What's the point of living? Senior Brother Qin, how can you give up on yourself? It's just 2 broken bones. What's the big deal? It's just that the broken bones will be fine once they are reconnected. It's not a big deal. Go. I know my own condition. He stared blankly at the ceiling of the cave and muttered in a daze, I never thought that I, Qingdao, would have a day like this. Living like this is worse than death. Seeing this, she had no choice but to continue. Senior brother Chen, I don't have anything else, but I have an ointment passed down in my family to heal broken bones. Don't worry, your injuries will recover in 3 months. Chapter 1462. I appreciate your kindness, Qingdao said indifferently. He could no longer find the arrogance and confidence he had in the past. There was only deathly stillness and despair. After experiencing such a thing, if he could only lie in bed as a cripple for the rest of his life, how could he accept it? Maybe he had never thought that he would encounter such a thing. It was completely out of his expectations and he did not know what to do. Senior sect brother Chen, you have helped me many times since I entered the sect. Now that you have encountered such a thing, let me help you. She said softly, don't be in a hurry to refuse. Just try for a while. Really, please believe me. The sect's doctors and pill masters have all said they cannot cure me. How can you help me? Fengju, don't waste your efforts. It is useless. How do you know it is useless if you don't try? There are many things in life that can only be known after trying. Even if others tell you it is useless, even if others extinguish the flame of your hope, you should not let the flame of hope in your heart be extinguished. Hearing this, Qingdao stared blankly at him. Do I still have that hope? You do not know. A disciple of the same peak, a disciple who always called me senior sect brother, I saved him but he pushed me to my death. I know that human nature is selfish. However, I never thought that a person I saved would push me to my death instead of helping me when I was on the brink of death. I deserve it. I deserve it. I saved someone I should not have saved. I deserve it. Seeing him shout emotionally, sometimes crying and sometimes laughing crazily, Fengjie went forward and pressed him down. Senior sect brother Chen, you did not do anything wrong. The fault does not lie with you. The heavens will not let you lie in bed and be unable to stand. Get out. Get out. Get out. He shouted, tears seeping out of the corners of his eyes. He tried to push Fengjie away, but in the next moment, the person who had been shouting hysterically quieted and fell asleep. Rest. Leave the rest to me. Fengjie put away the silver needles in his hand and looked at the unconscious man. Just as he was about to remove his clothes, he heard Luo Heng's angry scolding from outside. Too snobbish. Each and every one of them was too outrageous. Why didn't they think about how they used to act when they saw senior brother Chen? Now that they saw him like this, they even wanted to hit him while he was down. This is outrageous. Fengjie turned around and looked at the person who walked in. He asked, "What's wrong? Didn't you say you were going to get a doctor? Why did you come back by yourself? If those people are too outrageous." He rushed forward angrily and said, "I went to find a doctor, but none of them confirmed it. All of them said that there was no way. They didn't even want to come over and take a look. They are really not snobbish." Hearing that, Fengjie smiled. "It's fine. It's good that they don't come. It's good that you're here." "What do you mean?" Luo Heng asked. "I don't know anything about medicine. I can't save senior brother Chen. You don't need to save him. Just help me take off his clothes and support him. I'll do the orthopedic. As long as I correct the dislocated bones and bandage them with my secret ointment, he can get out of bed and walk around on his own in less than 3 months. Chapter 1463. Fengjie smiled. "So will you help? Or not? If you don't help, I'll do it myself." Hearing this, Luo Heng frowned. "Are you serious?" "Of course. Do you think I'm joking?" She looked at him and said, "Didn't you say it yourself? Those doctors and alchemists all said that he can't be saved and can only lie in bed for the rest of his life. Since that's the case, if you really want him to be well, why don't you trust me this time?" Seeing Fengjie's serious expression, Luo Heng thought for a moment before taking off Qingdao's shirt. He asked, "Do you want me to take off his pants?" "There's no need for pants. You just need to pull his pants down a little." Fengjie took off her boots and walked onto the bed. She pointed and said, "Turn his body halfway over and support him." Luo Heng could only do as he said. He supported the half-naked Qingdao and let him sleep on his side. Seeing that he didn't wake up for a long time, he asked, "What did you do to him?" "I pricked him with a needle." "Don't worry, he'll be fine." Feng Jiu squatted down, holding Qin Dao's sleeping arm with one hand and carefully feeling his spine with the other. His hand went from top to bottom to his lumbar spine and felt that it was dislocated. It was because of the dislocation of the lumbar spine that Qin Dao was paralyzed on the bed. "How is it?" Luo Heng saw that he didn't do anything after touching for a while and couldn't help asking. "We have to operate on him," she said slowly. "In addition to the dislocation of his lumbar spine, there are also bone fragments inside. We have to clean them up." She jumped off the bed, put on her boots and walked out. "Hey, where are you going?" "Wait for me. I'll get a basin of water." Fengjiu didn't look back. He went into the bathroom to get a basin of water and prepared the things he needed before returning to the bedroom. "Let him lie on his back. Come and help me," Fengjiu said. He took out knives, tweezers, silver needles and medicine. Luo Heng looked at the glinting sharp knives and couldn't help but shudder. What are you trying to do?" "Didn't I just say it? His injury is on his lumbar spine. As long as the bones are corrected and the broken bones are cleaned up, he will recover," she said without raising her head. After washing her hands, she said, "Don't make a fuss when I'm operating. If I sweat, remember to use a clean cloth to wipe my sweat. Don't let my sweat get on the wound. Also, when I ask you to stop the bleeding, you have to use the tweezers on this side to stop the bleeding. Don't ask too much." But can you do it?" Will he? He didn't dare to say the word die. He only felt his heart tremble as he looked at the situation. "Don't worry, this kind of surgery is just a piece of cake for me. It's not a big deal." As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something and went outside. Not long after, she came back again. "Where are you going this time?" Luo Heng asked. "To prevent anyone from disturbing us, I set up another barrier. Let's start." At this time, she took off her dusty coat and only wore a clean inner garment. She started the surgery on Qin Dao. Chapter 1464. Following that, Fengjiu's skillful movements left him dumbfounded. His mind went blank and all he could think of was the shocking scene in front of him. He never knew that a broken bone could be treated this way. He never knew that someone could do such a thing. He also didn't know that there was someone with such superb medical skills in this world. When he heard Feng Jiu's cold and calm voice telling him to wipe his sweat, he mechanically followed Feng Jiu's instructions and wiped his sweat in an orderly manner. When that voice told him to stop the bleeding, he picked up the gauze with tweezers and stopped the blood from seeping out of the wound. After an unknown amount of time, he felt dizzy. When he saw Feng Jiu sewing up the wound on Qin Dao's waist with an embroidery needle, he opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. It turned out that human flesh could be sewn as clothes. Okay, the surgery is done. Feng Jiu exhaled softly. The 4-hour surgery was finally completed, and the situation wasn't too bad. Actually, the recovery speed could be faster, and that was to use something to correct the displaced bones and fix them. However, that would be too troublesome. At that time, she would have to operate again to remove the things inside. Therefore, she used another method. Although it would be slower to let him recover naturally, at least she wouldn't have to operate again. Is it done?" Luo Heng mumbled. When he saw Feng Jiu nod in response, he finally couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground with a thud. Feng Jiu was stunned. She looked at Luo Heng, who had fainted on the ground, dumbfounded. What was going on? She went forward to check on him. Seeing that he was fine, he simply fainted because he couldn't withstand the impact. She didn't pay any attention to him. She took advantage of the time to concoct the ointment at the table. She also concocted a bottle of medicine. She plucked a ghost herb leaf from the space and mixed it with the ointment. After the ointment dissolved, she fed it to Qin Dao. "Speaking of which, you're quite lucky. This time you picked the ghost herb in the arcane territory. With it, your bones will recover faster." She chuckled. Although she could use vitality to quickly heal Qin Dao's wound, that would arouse suspicion. She could only wait for a few days to remove the stitches before applying the ointment. Luo Heng was woken up by the cold. He was lying on the ground in the middle of the night. When he jumped up, he saw Feng Jiu fiddling with the ointment at the table. He went forward and asked, "What are you doing? You're awake." She glanced at him, just in time. "Come here and let me tell you." "Oh. Of course. Of the ointment. This is the ointment." I'll come to help him remove the stitches in 3 days before I can apply the ointment on senior brother Chen's wound. It hasn't healed yet, so we can only apply some anti-inflammatory ointment. In addition, senior brother Chen has to drink a bottle of this ointment every day for the next 3 days. I'll leave this to you. I'll be busy these days, so I might not be able to take care of it. Chapter 1465. His injuries haven't been stabilized yet, so try not to move him when he's lying on the bed. Also, don't let anyone see him for the time being so as to avoid delaying the treatment and causing his lumbar vertebrae to shift. Fengjiu instructed but didn't hear a reply for a long time. He raised his head and saw Luo Heng staring blankly at him with a strange expression on his face. He asked, "What's wrong?" Luo Heng returned to his senses and looked at the medicine. He asked, "Where did you get those things? Don't tell me you concocted them yourself." Although they weren't pills, they were medicinal liquids. Only an alchemist could concoct medicinal liquids. He was just an odd job worker, so how could he know something that alchemists couldn't? "Oh, this." Fengjiu smiled. "Didn't I say it already? My family's ancestral secret recipe. This ointment has no other use. It can only treat broken limbs and bones. As for the other medicinal liquids, they were all given to me by others. Even if I don't know how to refine pills, I still have the pills you gave me in my Qingkuan bag. And there are quite a few of them." Hearing this, although Luo Heng was puzzled, he knew that what he said was very reasonable. Although he was just an odd job worker because he was good at running errands and had a sweet mouth, many alchemists would give him some low-grade pills as a reward. In that case, it wasn't surprising that Fengjiu had medicinal liquids that even alchemists couldn't concoct. "And all right. I'll remember everything you said." He nodded and put away the medicine on the table. He then said to Fengjiu, "Senior Marshal Brother Chen, leave everything here to me. I'll remember everything, so don't worry." "All right." Fengjiu nodded and told him a few other things in detail before leaving first. The next day she wanted to go to the 8th peak to visit her mother under the guise of delivering the spiritual medicine. Unexpectedly, just as she walked out of the cave, she saw her mother walking over from not far away. She was stunned for a moment before quickly walking forward. "Senior uncle, what's wrong?" Thinking about it, it was quite funny. She was clearly his mother and they already knew his identity, yet he still addressed her as senior uncle. "You live here?" Shangguan Wanrong looked at the simple and crude cave behind her and frowned slightly. "The odd-job disciples live here." She squinted her eyes with a smile and asked, "Do you want to go in and sit?" Shangguan Wanrong nodded and entered the cave with her. When she entered, she found that the cave was not only small, but the facilities were not complete. There was not even a place to take a bath. Thinking that she did not even have a place to take a bath, she could not help but feel guilty. She lived in this kind of place and became a servant of 3 Yang Peak because she came to find her. As her mother, not only did she fail to take care of her for so many years, she even let her experience such a life. She really shouldn't have. "Sit." Fengjiu gestured and poured a cup of tea for her. He then looked at her and asked with anticipation, "Can I call you mother now?" Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong's heart clenched. She raised her eyes to look at her daughter, whose eyes were filled with anticipation. Her eyes could not help but heat up. She reached out her hand and gently stroked her face, asking in a soft voice, "Then can you listen to mother about something?" Hearing this, Fengjiu's face revealed a happy smile and said in a light tone, "Mother, what is it? Tell me." If her father knew that she had found her mother, he would definitely be very happy. Chapter 1466. Fengjiu's smile faded. He looked at her and asked, "Then will you come back with me, mother?" "I can't leave. Master said that I have to reach nascent soul within 3 months and become a nascent soul cultivator. Otherwise, he'll exile me to the wastelands of extreme evilness and make me experience the most miserable of survival breakthroughs." Shangguan Wanrong looked at her and said, "I've come today because I want you to leave as soon as possible. It's not safe here and I'll be even more worried if you stay here. Go back to your father first. Once I've dealt with everything here, I'll definitely come find you." "Do you think you'll definitely be able to leave here safely, mother?" she asked softly. The atmosphere froze and became rather heavy. However, Fengjiu did not think much of it. He continued, Actually, you don't know this, but before I came here I originally planned to go to the Shangguan clan and ask them to take you back. However, I heard that you were here, so I came looking for you. Father can rest assured that I'll be alone outside, not because of anything else, but because I have the ability to protect myself. My strength may not be outstanding among the 8 great empires, but it's not a problem for me to protect myself. It's also not a problem for me to protect Mother. Shangguan Wanrong looked at her in a daze. At this moment the feeling she gave off was different from before. At this moment she was calm and indifferent. Her eyebrows exuded a self-confident expression. Her eyes were filled with wanton and arrogance. A noble and threatening aura filled the air from her body. Mother, I'm certain that 3 Yangzi wants to harm you. Although I don't know what he wants to do, it's definitely not something good. You can only tell me about it and let me share the burden with you, give you advice and discuss how to deal with it. Otherwise, I don't believe you'll be able to leave under 3 Yangzi's nose alive. But if you stay and something happens to you. She was extremely worried. She had never thought that she would be unwilling to leave, nor did she think that her presence would suddenly change when she mentioned this matter. If you don't leave, I won't leave either. I promised Father that I'd take Mother back. Shangguan Wanrong sat in silence for a while when she heard that. Only after a long while did she gently sigh, then stay here for now. However, you can't call me Nyongqin when you're outside. Otherwise, if he finds out, he'll definitely do you harm. Yes, I know. She smiled and nodded her head. Her eyes narrowed as she asked, then can Mother tell me the whole story now? When she saw this, Shangguan Wanrong had no other choice. Only then did she tell her the entire story and how she was brought back by 3 Yangzi. I have a feeling that there must be something wrong with 3 Yangzi's order for me to enter the nascent soul stage. If he really wants to take my life, I think it will be after I enter the nascent soul stage. She said slowly. However, how can it be so easy to enter the nascent soul realm? If I forcefully take the pill to advance, I'm worried that my foundation will be unstable, and it will be difficult to advance in the future. But in the current situation, even if I don't take the pill to advance, once the 3 months are up, I'm afraid that he will take action. Chapter 1467. No. Shangguan Wanrong directly refused and said with a solemn expression, this is too dangerous. Moreover, we can't fool him. Why can't we fool him? Mother, I'm already a nascent soul cultivator. My current strength is only suppressed by me. If I stay, I have enough strength to protect myself. I definitely won't let anything happen to me, and he definitely won't find out that we were switched. Shangguan Wanrong shook her head, no. Looking at her daughter's doubtful expression, she slightly paused and thought about it with slight hesitation before saying, he drugged me. My body isn't quite right. What? Fengjie was startled and grabbed her wrist to examine it. After a while, he doubtfully said, your body is fine. There's no poison in your body. It's this hand. She stretched out her other hand and opened her palm for Fengjie to see. Look, there's a red line here on the middle finger. Although it's not very obvious, this red blood line extends from the middle finger up to the arm. It's just that it's under the skin. If you don't pay attention, you won't be able to see it. Looking at the line of blood that appeared under the skin, Fengjie's gaze slightly darkened. No wonder she couldn't find any problems when she checked the pulse. It turned out that the hidden blood had accumulated on that arm. She stretched out her hand and carefully examined the wrist of that hand. With this examination, her expression became strange. This isn't poison, it's medicine. She slowly said and looked at her mother. I think I should know what Sen Yangzi wants to do. What does he want to do? Shangguan Wanrong softly asked. Fengjie looked at her and asked with a strange expression, Mother, do you know you have a spirit-gathering physique? She shook her head and asked, Spirit-gathering physique? What kind of physique is that? What's the use of it? Aside from being imprisoned in the Shangguan clan, she was brought here and came in contact with matters related to medicinal pills. She didn't know anything about this physique. The spirit-gathering physique is like a mobile spiritual energy storage device. The reason why Sen Yangzi wants you to advance to the nascent soul realm is so that he can use your nascent soul to refine pills after you condense it. She looked at Mo Tianga's shocked face and continued, the nascent soul of a person with the spirit-gathering physique is the purest. A nascent soul that is like a newborn has gathered all of your essence and blood. Furthermore, the medicine on your arm was prepared for him to use to concoct pills after you enter the nascent soul stage. To put it bluntly, he wants to use you as a human furnace to concoct pills that will allow him to live. Human furnace? Shangguan Wanrong's complexion turned pale, and a storm surged in her heart. She knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If she wasn't useful, why would 3 Yangzi bring her here and say that he wanted to take her in as his last disciple? So it turned out that he had this idea. He wanted to use her as a human furnace to concoct an immortal pill for himself. And mother, the medicine on your arm right now are all top-quality spiritual herbs. Each stalk is at least 500 years old. I don't know what method he used to lock in the medicinal properties of your arm so that they won't be lost, but one thing is certain. These things aren't harmful in your body. It's just that these medicines haven't been refined into pills, so you won't be able to absorb them in your body. Chapter 1468. No, it's not harmful to you. It's just that the medicine is currently locked onto your arm. If the medicine spreads, it'll be different. Fengjiu slightly frowned, thought for a bit and said, "It's a bit difficult to be sure right now. Even if I can disguise myself as you and learn everything, it'll be useless. He'll definitely be able to see through it. Also, among these medicines, there's a medicine that prevents you from escaping, the purple gold orange jasmine." She slowly walked around the cave as she thought of a solution. After a while she said, "The other medicines are fine. You can find a time to let your blood out and get rid of the medicine. However, this purple gold orange jasmine is a latent medicine. If you leave 3 Yang Peak too far away, this purple gold orange jasmine will become a poison. The only medicine that can cure this purple gold orange jasmine is the accompanying herb of the purple gold 3-leaf grass." Then when I entered the secret territory, why didn't the purple gold orange jasmine turn into a poison? Shangguan Wanrong asked curiously. That must be because you have the scent of the purple gold 3-leaf grass on you. Shangguan Wanrong shook her head, but I don't have that thing on me. If I did, I would definitely know. The purple gold orange jasmine doesn't have any scent. Even if it's in your body, you won't be able to detect it. However, it can sense the accompanying herb. The purple gold orange jasmine that leaves the accompanying herb will become a poison. The accompanying herb that leaves the purple gold orange jasmine will also wither after 7 days. Hearing this, Shangguan Wanrong said, "If that's the case, then I'll pretend that I don't know anything and continue to cultivate. I'll leave after I find the accompanying herb." "But if you do that, your situation..." Fengju was a bit worried. "It's okay. Nothing will happen." She revealed a smile and said, "You on the other hand, take care of yourself here. I won't come to see you about this to avoid arousing suspicion. I'll secretly go see you." Fengjiu calmed herself down and squinted her eyes with a smile. "Don't worry, mother. You're not alone. And I know." Her eyes were slightly red as she reached out and hugged her tightly. Mother and daughter talked for a while in the Immortal's cave. It wasn't until near noon that Shangguan Wanrong got up and left, intending to return to the Immortal's cave to cultivate. Although 3 months was a bit fast with the help of medicinal pills, it was not impossible to enter the Yuanying stage. In the next few days, other than taking care of her mother's situation, Fengjiu would occasionally take time to visit Qingdao. 3 days later, the stitches were removed and the ointment was applied. However, Qingdao still hadn't woken up. Fengjiu felt that a sleeping Qingdao was better for his recovery. At the very least, he wouldn't be too agitated. Fengjiu decided to let Qingdao sleep until his lumbar vertebrae had more or less recovered. At that time, Qingdao would be able to see the results and wouldn't move his body and cause the wound to open again. On this day, Fengjiu came to Qingdao's cave abode again. Before he got close, he heard Luo Heng's voice coming from inside the cave abode. Fengjiu, you're here? Come in, I have something to tell you." She stepped forward and asked, "What's the matter?" Unexpectedly, Luo Heng blocked her way. "Fengjiu, tell me in detail. It's very uncomfortable to be left hanging like this. And tell me who are you?" "I'm Fengjiu." "Is." She chuckled and said, "As for the rest, you don't have to be too curious. Anyway, you just need to know that I won't harm you." Chapter 1470. Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh. Of course not. You're a great alchemist. How can I compare to you? Alright, I'll go back first. I'll come back in a few days. With that, he waved his hand and left. Luo Heng stood outside the cave and watched. He had been living here for a while. Other than being able to take care of Qin Dao, it also saved him the trouble of running around. Although he hadn't interacted much with Qin Dao before, he still respected his character. Now that he was in such a state, although he couldn't save him, he could help to take care of him. A few days later in the morning, the Great Elder followed a few clan members to Qin Dao's cave. Before they entered, they saw Luo Heng coming out to greet them. It's the Great Elder. Greetings, Great Elder. Are you here to see Senior Brother Qin? Luo Heng asked with a smile. I'm here to bring him back to the clan. The Great Elder glanced at Luo Heng and asked, why are you still here? Oh, it's like this. Senior Brother Qin has helped me a lot previously. I thought that it would be inconvenient for him to move around, so I came to take care of him for a while. With that, he paused and said, Great Elder, there's one more thing that Senior Brother Qin asked me to pass on. What is it? He glanced at Luo Heng and asked. It's like this. Senior Brother Qin said that he wants to stay here for a few more months before going back. After all, he has lived here for so long and has grown attached to it. He can't bear to leave so suddenly, so before he could finish, he was interrupted. He's already in such a state and he still wants to stay here? Isn't he staying here to be a joke? This is ridiculous. Qin Dao's spine is injured. Could it be that his brain is also not working well? The Great Elder's face was filled with displeasure as he exuded a powerful aura. It shocked Luo Heng so much that he couldn't speak for a while. All of you, come with me and carry him back to the clan. The Great Elder said to the people behind him as he stepped forward to enter the clan. Luo Heng was so nervous that he didn't know what to do. At this moment he saw a green figure walking towards them. He immediately shouted happily, Fengjiu. Fengjiu, you're here. Quick, come over here quickly. Fengjiu, who had not been here for a few days, wanted to come and take a look. When he saw the few people in front of the cave residence and the old man, he knew their identities. When he saw Luo Heng's anxious face, he knew that he could not handle the Great Elder. Hence he quickly jogged to the front. Grand Elder, Grand Elder. You must be Great Elder Qin, right? Grand Elder, I heard from Senior Brother Luo that Grand Elder had come to visit Senior Brother Qin several times. I always hoped to meet Grand Elder, but I didn't expect to meet you today. Fengjiu quickly walked past Luo Heng and arrived in front of the First Elder. His face was full of surprise and excitement, as if he had seen someone he respected and worshipped. His eyes shone with surprise as he looked at the First Elder. The First Elder was slightly startled. Seeing the look of worship on the young man's face, he couldn't help but let out a soft cough and asked, Who are you? How could he be so unruly? Why are you making such a big fuss? First Elder, although Disciple Feng 9 is only a lowly handyman, my admiration for the First Elder is like an unstoppable river, like the overflowing Yellow River. The First Elder's name is like thunder in my ears, and you are like a god in my heart. I also heard from Senior Brother Qin that as the First Elder of the number 1 Pill sect in the 8 Great Empires, the First Elder does not forget the clansmen, and it is not difficult to guide and help them. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.